Murder in Moss Park. A Canada-wide warrant has been issued for a Toronto man wanted in the fatal shooting of a 43-year-old man last week.
And sparks fly before and after a leaders' debate in Northern Ontario. This as Doug Ford faces questions about comments he made about the death penalty.
And don't put that shovel away just yet. Another snowstorm is on its way to the GTA this weekend. We'll tell you more about the next snow dump.
And in case you missed it, it's Valentine's Day, right, Lena? And love is in the air at the zoo. There are plenty of ways to show love to your sweetheart with fun and interactive events at the Toronto Zoo.
You're watching Live at 5.
Good evening. I'm Bakari Sack.
And I'm Leah Latifat. Thank you for joining us tonight. An update today from Toronto Homicide detectives on the city's third murder of the year. A 43-year-old man shot to death in Moss Park last week. And now police have issued a Canada-wide warrant for a suspect.
CP24's Beatrice Vaisman is at 51 Division with the latest developments. Beatrice.
Bakari, Lena, this was Detective Sergeant Alan Bartlett, who's in charge of this homicide case, coming before reporters today, putting out a photograph of the man who's now wanted on a Canada-wide warrant for his role in this homicide. He is 24 years old. His name is Delano Robertson Barry. He is from Toronto, and police say he should be considered armed and dangerous. They are asking if you see him, do not approach him. This was a homicide that happened last Wednesday. It was February 5th around 8 o'clock, Queen and Sherbourne. Police say the victim in this case, 43-year-old Lyle Punal, was shot once. He was found with one single gunshot wound. He was rushed to hospital where, unfortunately, despite the best efforts of first responders and medical professionals, he died from his injuries. The detective sergeant today saying that he would not speak on the altercation or provocation for this homicide, but did say that he did not believe that Mr. Punal and the man accused in his homicide were known to one another prior to their encounter here in Moss Park. And so here was the appeal from the detective sergeant in charge of this case, not only to the suspect, but to anyone who might be helping him hide.
I also want to make it clear that if you know the whereabouts of Mr. Robertson Barry and you are providing him with assistance in evading capture, I would caution you against that. There are, of course, criminal charges associated with that. Finally, Mr. Robertson Barry, if you're watching, I'm going to encourage you to seek the advice of legal counsel and contact the police and surrender.
The detective sergeant saying he does not believe there is a greater threat to public safety, though, again, underscoring the fact that Mr. Robertson Barry is to be considered armed and dangerous. If you see him out and about, again, do not approach him. Call 911. Let police handle it. And again, this Canada-wide warrant has now been issued. He is wanted for second-degree murder. Back to you.
All right, Beatrice Vaisman live outside 51 Division tonight. Thanks for this, Bea. Another winter storm could be on its way into Toronto this weekend.
Environment Canada has issued a winter storm watch for the city and the rest of the GTHA beginning Sunday. It could bring between 15 and 25 centimeters of snow with peak snowfall rates of 3 to 6 centimeters per hour. It's forecasted to start Sunday morning with snowy conditions lasting until nightfall.
Hundreds of crew members and over 1,400 pieces of equipment have been clearing the snow from our roads, cycling infrastructure, sidewalks, multi-use paths, literally ongoing back-to-back rounds. We've had multiple passes of equipment that were required because of the heavy snow, but also because of the cold, frigid temperatures. The snow was not melting, so as a result, multiple rounds had to be activated in order to properly clear the snow to make all of the roads, sidewalks, and bicycle lanes safe and passable.
Early next week, after the weekend snow has been cleared, crews will begin snow removal operations to get rid of the large piles of snow that are left behind by the plows. This snow can restrict traffic flow, it can obstruct sight lines, and create issues for both pedestrians and parking. Snow removal requires crews to collect the snow into dump trucks and remove it to a designated snow storage site. So we appreciate everyone's help to keep snow routes clear of vehicles while our crews do their job.
And officials are urging drivers to stay off the roads and take transit to get around the city this weekend.
Well, speaking of getting around the city, let's check on the evening commute with CP24 traffic specialist, Aj Bois. Aj, it's 5:05. How are the roads looking?
What do you think, Bakari? Give me a guess. What are you thinking?
You're putting
Lena?
Bakari on the spot
Lena?
here. I'm going to take a guess here because you always say I'm psychic,
Yes.
Ajwa.
Yes.
I'm going to guess it's busy and brutal out there.
Oh, I like those adjectives. Yes, it is. It's all of those things. So if you're trying to make your way out this hour, it's going to take you a while. If you're trying to start your long weekend right, maybe you have some Valentine's plans. It is a busy afternoon commute. So we'll start with these major issues happening on the eastbound lanes of the 401 in the Express at Dixie. Going to count the lanes here. It's the 3 left lanes that are blocked following this collision. 2 right lanes are getting by, but really creating a slowdown, both core and collectors from before the 410. Also issues of note, this is on the northbound lanes of the Don Valley Parkway, just as you make your way through Dundas. The right lane of the highway and the acceleration on-ramp is blocked because of this stall. Again, they're still doing cleanup. There's still a lot of snow in these right and left lanes. And if you're on the Gardner, no issues, but really jammed on the westbound side and even the eastbound side if you're trying to make your way in or exit the downtown core. Problems to deal with north of the city, northbound 400 up at King Road. Crews dealing with a collision blocking the left lane and the right lane of the exit ramp blocked with emergency crews. I'll send it back to you both.
This CP24 traffic report is brought to you by 407 ETR. Enjoy the journey with a stress-free commute.
The union representing 30,000 City of Toronto workers has officially requested a no board report, moving closer to a potential strike or lockout.
QP Local 79 says that the city has refused to engage in meaningful negotiations despite months of bargaining. The union claims its workers are overworked, understaffed, and underpaid. Last month, more than 90% of members voted in favor of strike action. QP Local 79 represents workers in public health, cleaning, court services, childcare, recreation programming, and shelters.
Instead of addressing the fundamental issues clogging the Central Ambulance Communication Center, where our experienced call takers and emergency medical dispatchers are leaving in droves, they spent months trying to pressure us to accept an additional 12-hour shift for existing staff who are already being overworked beyond their limit. The city has frankly not been serious. The city would rather focus on threatening our members with loss of wages and benefits if they strike, something we already know, because the employer hopes fear will push workers into accepting a bad deal.
The city says it remains committed to reaching a deal with the union at the bargaining table.
Our offer is nearly 15% in terms of wage increases over 4 years. This 4-year agreement will allow the city to plan budgets and operations for that period and has the added benefit of providing stability for our workers and their families in what are continuing to be uncertain economic times and made even more uncertain by recent events south of the border.
Once a no board report is accepted from the Ministry of Labor, the union will be in a legal strike position 17 days later.
You're watching Live at 5 on Toronto's breaking news, CP24.
We're less than 2 weeks away from the election day, and the provincial leaders squared off in their first debate today. We're going to tell you how it went. That's next. Right now, let's turn to the latest Ontario election numbers. Nightly polling by Nanos for CTV News shows the Liberals gaining some ground on the PCs.
According to these latest numbers, the Progressive Conservatives have 43.9% support, down 1.6 points. The Liberals gained 1.4 points and sit at 30.9% support. The New Democrats are at 17.1%, while the Greens sit at 5.8%.
And when it comes to who will be premier, support for Doug Ford was down nearly 2% to 38.8%, followed by Bonnie Crombie at 26.8%. The NDP's Mark Stiles is at 16.1% support, while Green Party leader Mike Schreiner remains nearly unchanged at 7.6%. Election day in Ontario is February 27th. Advance polls will be open from the 20th through the 22nd.
One of the interesting things in terms of what's happened in the last few days is, as you might remember, the progressive Conservatives were leading in every region except Toronto, where it was a toss-up. Now we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick for the Ontario Provincial Liberals in the city of Toronto. So it'll be interesting to see whether they start to improve their fortunes in Toronto. If they don't do well in Toronto, it's almost difficult. It's almost impossible for them to challenge the Ford Progressive Conservatives.
And a recent Nanos poll suggests Ontarians are split on who they trust to tackle the shortage of doctors. 28% favor the Liberals, followed by 26% saying they prefer the PC party to handle the issue. Then the NDP with 21%. This is worth noting. Another 21% said they trust none of the above.
And just a programming note, tune in Monday evening at 6:30 right here on CP24 to watch the provincial leaders square off. Again, that's Monday evening at 6:30 right here on CP24.
And Ontario's four main party leaders, they squared off in their first debate today in North Bay.
All right, let's go live to CTV's Queen's Park Bureau Chief, Siobhan Morris, to find out who won. Siobhan, let's hear it.
No, I'm not going to tell you who won, but I will say this was a little bit different than we typically see in a Northern Leaders debate. We typically see a more relaxed atmosphere, a little bit more of an exchange of ideas than a boxing match. This was different. You really saw all three opposition leaders really go after Doug Ford. He was on defense the whole time. He really wanted to make this, as he has the campaign, be about defending Ontario in the face of tariffs, but all the other leaders really wanted to talk about where they feel Doug Ford has fallen short, the gaps in his record on things like housing, affordability, the mental health crisis, and health care.
And Siobhan, the party leaders were all asked about their comments in relation to something Doug Ford said at a police gala in London recently. What's the backstory there?
So this actually happened on what was the first night of the election campaign, but these comments have just surfaced. Essentially, Doug Ford was addressing this police gala in London, Ontario, and he went off script, talked about frustration with criminals being re-released or not being facing harsh enough sentences. And he talked about that if somebody invades a home and kills someone, he believes that they should go straight to the Sparky, in his words. It looks like a support there for capital punishment. Now, his campaign has said that was just a joke made in bad taste. We had hoped as reporters to be able to ask Doug Ford some questions about that after the debate today. He was scheduled to take questions, but then we were abruptly told that he had left for a scheduled event. We did, however, hear from other party leaders. Here's what they had to say.
It's a pretty serious matter to joke about, I would say. I think it speaks to character. I think he was in a room he thought was friendly, and he felt that he could say what he wanted, much like that dinner he had with developers when he told them he would open up the Greenbelt. That's what I think it shows.
Okay, Siobhan, also, I have to ask you this. So Nick Nanos, he does nightly polling for us. I talked to him earlier today. We talked about issues of the day. He mentioned healthcare and how this can make or break the campaign. What did you hear about healthcare today?
I would say on healthcare, you really heard the message from Bonnie Crombie that she's been driving this whole time, which is that Doug Ford hasn't got it done in terms of the promises he made specifically to end hallway healthcare. That one dates back to his very first campaign as PC leader 2018. And she and Marit Stiles were both arguing that Doug Ford shouldn't be trusted with another mandate if we haven't seen progress on that file in particular, especially since we've actually seen that problem get worse over the last 6.5 or so years of the Doug Ford time at Queen's Park. That was really the focus. We also saw some connection with mental health and homelessness, really talking about how those things are intertwined, and that also a feeling that Doug Ford has not done enough to address that file either.
Okay, CTV's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Siobhan Morris reporting live tonight. Thanks for joining us, Siobhan.
Thanks, Siobhan.
You're welcome.
It's 5:15, holding at 7 below zero. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, the GST and HST holiday ends this weekend. We're going to take a look at the real impact next. The GST tax break ends tomorrow night after 2 months of some slight savings.
Okay, so the federal program, which was matched by Ontario, eliminated the HST from various goods, including children's clothing and toys, as well as restaurant and takeaway meals. There are mixed reviews about whether the tax holiday actually led to more spending, with many small businesses complaining about the effort it took to make all the changes to their systems.
And restaurant transactions increased by an average of 7.6% during the GST and HST holiday. That's according to new data from Restaurants Canada. The average transaction size at table service restaurants rose by 5% year over year in the 6 weeks of the holiday. Quick service restaurants saw an 8.3% point increase in transaction sizes, and drinking places, they saw a 7.5% boost. Restaurants Canada is calling on the government to extend this holiday.
We were incredibly supportive of this, especially during a time of affordability crisis. So to say that we are happy with the results is probably an understatement. Primarily, as you just said, we're seeing average transaction sizes increase. So the average check is up. We're seeing foot traffic increase. But most importantly, and I think really impactful, is we're seeing the job growth. So in a time of economic uncertainty, we are able to see the impact of this with jobs, and hardworking Canadians are able to get back out and enjoy some of those things that they've had to cut back on over the last couple of years. So really thrilled with the results.
And the federal government had billed the GST holiday as a way to help out regular Canadians in the face of rising costs.
Well, Mayor Olivia Chow toured the Cadbury factory at Queen and Gladstone today to encourage people to shop local and buy Canadian in these uncertain times.
As President Trump threatens a senseless trade war, now is time to support locally made products and buy Canadian whenever we can. And which is why I am proud to be here on Valentine's Day to support a made in Toronto chocolate manufacturer. So as you are thinking about giving something for your Valentine's today, think about Canadian-made chocolate. It sweetens people's lives and shows that we support things that are done locally.
Mondelez Canada, which owns Cadbury, Nabisco, Peak Freends, and Sour Patch Kids, operates several factories in Canada and employs more than 2,000 people.
And the City of Toronto is showing its Canadian pride tomorrow with a party at Nathan Phillips Square to mark Flag Day. The free event features a skating party, free hot chocolate, food trucks, and a special performance of Welcome to the Rock by the cast of Come From Away. Social media sensation Brittle Star, as well as Ontario's Poet Laureate, will also join the party, and the mayor. The Flag Day event begins at 10 o'clock.
It's 5:21, holding at 7 below zero, but feeling more like 14 below outside. This is Live at 5.
It is Valentine's Day, and we're celebrating love and nature at the Toronto Zoo. More on the events available there for you and your Valentine. That's coming up.
These flowers for Valentine's Day. We're at the Toronto Zoo. Think of this as our Valentine to you, an animal-themed one. We're joined with a couple of friends here today. Nice to see you. We got a snake, we got an owl, and we've got their friends. This is Bethany, and this is Shannon. And thanks so much for being with us here today. Tell me about who you've got with you.
So this is Butters. She's a great horned owl. So she came to us very young here at the Toronto Zoo, and she's one of our ambassador animals. So she's one of the animals that comes out of their enclosure up close to meet people. If you come to the zoo, you might see us hanging out on the pathway, or if you come to any special events like Love at the Zoo that we have going on this weekend, you might get a chance to meet Butters up close and personal.
And you're feeding Butters too, just to keep her calm here. What are you feeding her?
So she's got some nice bits of mouse and chick. These guys are carnivores. They would be hunting all sorts of things in the wild. They're one of the few animals that will actually actively hunt skunks as well. Owls don't have a sense of smell, so the skunk's defense mechanism doesn't really scare them. So these guys in the wild would absolutely be hunting skunks as well.
Okay, so from feathers to something a little creepy crawly over here. Shannon, tell me about your friend.
Yeah, so this is Michael J. Fox snake. He is an eastern fox snake, which is another native species to right here in Ontario. So we're really lucky in our outreach department here at the Toronto Zoo to work with so many of our native species that people might not know can be living right in their very own backyard. So fox snakes might live in like around your cottage area. They live in forested areas, but they're also really good swimmers. So you might see them in the water sometimes.
I can give a little pet too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so they're really scaly. A lot of people think that snakes are slimy or wet, but they're not. They're just really shiny and smooth.
Very smooth too. And this is an opportunity with your cool gig. You get to walk around the zoo with creatures like this and let people interact with them. And people are afraid of snakes too. What's that like?
For sure. Yeah. So a lot of people, they might not relate Valentine's Day with a snake, but snakes are really awesome to have around. They're so useful. They're so important to our environment. So we really like giving people the chance to see these snakes up close and learn that they are perfectly safe and they're just as important as every other animal. If we didn't have snakes around, we would have a lot more rodents, just like great horned owls. They do take care of our rats and our mice, and I don't think anybody wants more of those around in our environments. So yeah, snakes are really important, and it's so nice to be able to give people from all over and from our very own communities too the chance to meet these animals and get to relate to them and see that they are really nice and safe.
Snakes need love too, even on Valentine's Day. And I know that animals like the one you're holding right now, they serve a purpose too.
Absolutely, yeah. So all of the animals that we have here at the Toronto Zoo, we want to have for a specific reason. So we do have an Animal Lives with Purpose plan where all of the different species that we have here at the zoo play an important role. So the animals that Shannon and I work with, their role is to be that connection with the community, as with all of our animals in the zoo, but especially the ones that we can bring up close and personal. I personally love working with the native species, as Shannon mentioned, partly because I then get to know their personality and what they're like as individuals. So when I see them in the wild, I then have that curiosity about
What's Butter's personality?
Oh, she's a chatterbox for sure, because she was raised by people. She never really learned to be quiet. She keeps doing that kind of baby begging food call all the time. But she loves hanging out with people. She gets a little bit possessive of her toys, but she loves them. So yeah, she's great to work with for sure.
I won't take the toys, I promise, Butter. We're hanging out at the Orchid Oasis, by the way. This is a place you could take a stroll, maybe take a date. There's an idea for you. And this is all part of the Love at the Zoo-a-thon, we'll call it, that's going on all weekend long, timed up with Family Day weekend, by the way. A great idea, bring the kids out. Also great for adults, too. Like I mentioned, get that date, maybe, and take a stroll through these orchids and meet some new friends like we just did here. Thanks so much, Bethany and Shannon. Appreciate it. Stay with us. CP24, we've got more news coming your way and more animal action, too. Stay with us.
Whatever you do, don't put that shovel away just yet. Another snowstorm is on its way to the GTA this weekend. We're going to tell you more about the next snow dump.
Murder in Moss Park. A Canada-wide warrant has been issued for a Toronto man wanted in the fatal shooting of a 43-year-old man last week.
And sparks fly before and after a leaders' debate in Northern Ontario. This as Doug Ford faces questions about comments he made about the death penalty.
And it's Valentine's Day, and love is certainly in the air at the Toronto Zoo. We're live there, and we're going to show you all the ways you can show love to your Valentine with exciting events at the zoo.
This is Live at 5.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lena Latafat.
I'm Bakari Savage. Another winter storm could be on its way to Toronto this weekend.
Environment Canada has issued a winter storm watch for the city and the rest of the GTHA beginning Sunday. This is a live shot from the salt yards tonight. Now, this storm that we are watching very closely could bring 15 to 25 centimeters of snowfall, with peak snowfall rates of 3 to 6 centimeters per hour. It is forecasted to start Sunday morning with snowy conditions lasting until nightfall.
It's quite challenging, but we're really well prepared for it. We've got great teams. The contractors are doing a great job. Our staff is doing a tremendous job. I think the residents have been also doing their part. We really appreciate that. But it's a lot of snow to move, and sadly, I mean, we have some sun today, which is nice. We'll make some progress today, but the weather's going to be quite cold. The temperatures are going to be below zero all next week, and so much of the snow that's there will only move if we move it. So we're
expecting another approximately 25 centimeters of snow this weekend, and we will have to activate all of our plowing and salting activations again in order to clear the roads, the cycling infrastructure, and the sidewalks. However, over the weekend, we will assess how much more of our snow infrastructure can actually accommodate, can store the snow, and then determine the magnitude of snow removal that we will be undertaking early next week.
And officials are urging drivers to stay off the roads and just try to take transit to get around the city.
All right, let's get a check on your evening commute with CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa and CIA. It's been a really busy week for you, Adj.
It really has. It feels like there's no break in sight, but I'll get a break this weekend. But if you're making your way out on the major routes, wish I could give you a break. 401 is shaping up to be even slower than it was, I would say, even an hour ago. A lot of problems in the mix as well. We'll start with this multi-vehicle collision. It's on the eastbound 401 in the Express. Just as you make your way through Dixie, the 3 left lanes are out with this collision. That's why traffic not moving from well before the 410. And then further east on the 401, MTO crews on scene, and they're doing snow removal. That is still happening on a lot of a major area highways in the distance here. That's where that snow pile is. They were just piling up all the snow. Now MTO's making their rounds to clear it. So if you're in the collectors, that's not where you want to be. The 2 right lanes are blocked. Express lanes are moving a whole lot better. 401 westbound at the top of the ramp that takes you to McCowan. We are dealing with a collision. It is in the center lane, and then further west on the 401 on the approach to the DVP 404 just past Victoria Park. It's right in that middle spot. You'll find the 2 left lanes blocked at the collision, so creating quite the slowdown. Outside of camera view, crews on scene of a collision blocking lanes on Mount Pleasant just south of St. Clair. I'll send it back to you both.
An update today from Toronto Homicide detectives on the city's 3rd murder of the year.
A 43-year-old man shot to death in Moss Park last week, and now police have issued a Canada-wide warrant for a suspect. CP24's Beatrice Faisman is at 51 Division with these latest developments. Tell us more about the suspect, Beatrice.
He's 24 years old, Lena. His name is Delano Robertson Barry. He is from the city of Toronto, and now he's wanted for second-degree murder in connection with a homicide last Wednesday in which 43-year-old Lyle Punal was shot to death. Police saying that there really was, it seems, some kind of altercation between the suspect and the victim prior to this shooting happening, though the detective sergeant, Alan Bartlett, in charge of this case, would not go into the specifics as to what this altercation was really involving, though he did talk about the fact that he did not believe the suspect and the victim knew each other before encountering each other at Queen and Sherbourne last Wednesday, February 5th. It was around 8 o'clock that night that police were called to Moss Park after gunshots were heard. Police saying that Mr. Punal suffered from 1 single gunshot wound. He was rushed to hospital. Tragically, his life could not be saved. Here's a bit of what we heard from the detective sergeant in charge of this case.
I'm not able to speak about provocation. What I can say is that at this point, I have no evidence to suggest that there was a pre-existing relationship, but I'll reiterate one of my earlier comments that we are looking for the assistance of the public. This is an active, ongoing investigation. If somebody knows something that they believe may be relevant, I'm certainly happy to hear from them.
Detective Sergeant Bartlett said that he believed this was a targeted shooting, although, again, it sounds like something happened just in the moments leading up to this homicide, Lena and Bakari. He also had a message to anyone who might have any information, who is in that area, who saw something, heard something. The detective sergeant talked about a video that had been shown to other members of the media that police had not yet seen, so he appealed for that person with that video to come forward to provide it to investigators. And he had a message to the suspect himself as well. Seek legal counsel and turn yourself in. Back to you.
Okay, reporting live from 51 Division, CP24's Beatrice Vaisman. Thank you. It's now 5:36, holding at 7 below zero. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, the union representing 30,000 City of Toronto workers has officially requested a no board report, moving closer to a potential strike or lockout. The union representing 30,000 City of Toronto workers has officially requested a no board report, moving closer to a potential strike or lockout.
The QP Local 79 says that the city has refused to engage in meaningful negotiations despite months of bargaining. The union claims its workers are overworked, understaffed, and underpaid. Well, last month, more than 90% of members voted in favor of strike action. The QP Local 79 represents workers in public health, cleaning, court services, childcare, recreation programming, and shelters.
The city would rather hide behind a 25-year-old wage system that has led to a staffing crisis in long-term care and the Central Ambulance Communication Centre. Vacancies across the city have ballooned by 65% since the pandemic, with roughly 1,400 positions unfilled. The staffing crisis in long-term care is at a level never seen before. Currently, there are over 500 vacancies, a 700% increase from pre-pandemic levels.
So the city responded to this. It says it remains committed to reaching a deal with the union at the bargaining table.
Our bargaining team has worked hard each and every day. We are at the table each and every day, and we have made it clear to Local 79 that we will bargain each and every day if that's what it takes. And I really do believe that the focus over this next period of time needs to be about being at the table, having the discussions at the table, and getting us to the agreement that we need to be.
And once a no board report is accepted from the Ministry of Labor, the union will be in a legal strike position 17 days later.
Well, the leaders of Ontario's main political parties were in North Bay today for their first debate during the election campaign.
He's going to unleash the economic potential of Ontario. Where is that happening? It is not happening here.
Well, I'm the only one on stage that has never raised a tax. We've never downloaded anything.
Well, the focus was on northern issues, but the discussion highlighted concerns of voters across the province. The leaders of the New Democrats, Liberal and Green parties took aim at PC leader Doug Ford. He was called out on his housing and health care records. Among other issues, the other leaders spoke after the debate.
Well, you know, I actually think that our plan to build 2 million homes that people can afford in the communities they know and love both addresses people's affordability concerns, which is the number one issue I hear at the door, their anxiety around economic uncertainty that we're facing, and climate. Because if you actually build homes that people can afford and they can avoid long, expensive commutes, it reduces pollution, it protects the places we love, and it makes your life more affordable.
People are very open to the fact that we are going to provide the basics for them. You know, we're not about fantasy tunnels under the 401 and giving $2 billion to a foreign company, a foreign spa at Ontario Place. We're going to get you a family doctor. If there's one thing I am going to do is ensure that everyone in Ontario has a family doctor. We're going to recruit doctors, so even in the north you have adequate coverage. We're going to hire nurses and PSWs. I'm going to cut your taxes.
God forbid they kill an innocent person. I don't even go 25 years. I send them right to Sparky, and we'll take care of everything from there. This is...
You know, what can I say? The Premier, he always flip-flops. You know, he says one thing one place, and then he says something else. We've heard him make statements when he thinks he's in a private setting on opening up the Greenbelt, and then he assured us he wouldn't, and then he went and tried to do it. So he flip-flops all the time. So it speaks to his character. We're never really sure where he stands. Is it Doug Ford that you saw at the police gala, or is it the Doug Ford that said, oh, no, his staff said he doesn't stand by that statement? So he flip-flops.
So that was a lot of the leaders commenting on something Doug Ford said recently. He made comments about capital punishment at a police gala in London. He sort of joked about bringing back the death penalty. This was when he was talking about home invaders. We did reach out to the Premier's office looking for comment because Doug Ford is in hot water over these comments. And his office says that it was just a poor taste joke.
Well, the GST.
This is Doug Ford, right? He says one thing in front of the public and then another thing behind closed doors, and he does it over and over again. He has shown us who he is. I will say I think they're disgusting and inappropriate comments. But look, as Premier, Ontarians can count on me to always be clear about where I stand on issues that are very close to the values of Canadians, including that one.
So again, a spokesperson for Doug Ford has said he does not support capital punishment, but made a poor taste joke out of frustration for the many people affected by violent criminals out on the streets. But the opposition leader certainly had a lot to say about that today.
Well, the GST tax break ends tomorrow night after 2 months of some slight savings.
The federal program, which was matched by Ontario, eliminated the HST from various goods, including children's clothing and toys, as well as restaurant and takeaway meals. There are mixed reviews about whether the tax holiday actually led to more spending, with many small businesses complaining about the effort it took to make all the changes to their systems.
Restaurant transactions increased by an average of 7.6% during the GST and HST holiday. This is according to new data from Restaurants Canada. The average transaction size at table service restaurants rose by 5% year over year in the 6 weeks of the holiday. Quick service restaurants saw an 8.3 percentage point increase in transaction sizes. Drinking places saw a 7.5% boost. Restaurants Canada is calling on the government to extend the tax holiday.
I think when it comes to the restaurant industry, we actually got off a little easier. I'm not going to take away from the work that these operators put into it, because it is, a tough job and they're all working incredibly hard. But in comparison to retail, because it was almost, 95% of our items that were GST and HST free, it was a matter of changing some categories in our POS. Whereas if you were in retail, there was a bunch of different SKUs and it got a little bit more complicated. So, but the reality is we've seen this work to be able to have the government acknowledge that the GST could be an implication, impact people's spending is the start of something. But now that we're seeing these results during an economic uncertainty, the momentum that we've seen, now we are calling on the government to let's extend this, especially during this time of uncertainty. It's working.
The federal government had billed the GST holiday as a way to help out regular Canadians in the face of rising costs.
Mayor Olivia Chow toured the Cadbury factory at Queen and Gladstone today to encourage people to shop local and buy Canadian in these uncertain times.
Chocolate bars like Caramilk, Wonder Bar, Crunchy can only be found in Canada. As shoppers, let us do everything we can to support locally made Canadian products. By doing so, we can protect Canadian jobs and support businesses choosing to invest in Canada. Let us show our pride by shopping local. And on this Valentine's Day, show your love for Canada and shop local and buy Canadian.
Mondelez Canada, which owns Cadbury, Peak Freens, and Sour Patch Kids, operates several factories in Canada and employs more than 2,000 people.
Well, the city of Toronto is showing its Canadian pride tomorrow with a party at Nathan Phillips Square to mark Flag Day. The free event features a skating party, free hot chocolate, food trucks, and a special performance of Welcome to the Rock by the cast of Come From Away. Social media sensation Brittle Star, as well as Ontario's poet laureate, will also join the mayor. The Flag Day events begin at 10 a.m.
WestJet is reporting a drop in bookings to the U.S. since the tariff threats started.
What we have seen, though, since the tariff announcements, that our sales from Canada into the U.S. have actually dropped very significantly.
And the airline CEO says that interest in flying south has dropped by about 25%. The drop in the loonie compared to the U.S. dollar is also likely a factor. A WestJet CEO made the comment in Calgary during an announcement on a new repair and testing facility.
548, -7 out there. You're watching Live at 5.
And it's Valentine's Day at the zoo. We're going to show you all the ways that you can celebrate with your sweetheart at the Toronto Zoo.
We're celebrating love at the Toronto Zoo for this Valentine's Day. And maybe we should mention the birds and the bees a little bit while we're talking about Valentine's Day. I'm with Paula, the manager of science development, and this is where the magic happens in this room right here.
Well, this is kind of where the end of the magic sort of happens. So a lot of the work that we do here at the zoo in the reproductive sciences department is to try to figure out how to store and maintain living genetic material. So again, we deal a lot with rare and endangered species whose genetic diversity has now been diminished down to very little. So we figure out how best to, even if the animal passes away, how best to collect cells and freeze them and store them in a living state. So this is our cryobank. It's filled with frozen sperm, eggs, embryos. We also have somatic cells here. All of these cells here could potentially create offspring. And so there are some genetics here that these animals have long passed, but we can actually bring them out back into the population again.
Okay, so it doesn't exactly look romantic here, but we are getting to see kind of behind the curtain to see exactly the inner workings at the Toronto Zoo. Can you give me like a real life example, an animal that you've helped procreate?
Oh, sure, yeah. So our iconic project is actually with wood bison. So we've been working on it for quite a number of years. And we have, one of our tanks is dedicated to storing wood bison material. So we are freezing sperm embryos. We're creating embryos in the lab, freezing those, and then we're able to transfer them. So in the last few years, all of the bison that have been born here at the Toronto Zoo since about 2009 have been the product of an assisted reproductive technology of some sort. So we've been building them from the ground. There were none to begin with. We've been building them from the ground up, all the way from collecting sperm and freezing it, doing artificial inseminations to create babies, creating embryos, to sex sorting technologies, actually. So we took sperm, we put it on a sex sorter, and separated for male versus female.
Okay, so this is where the science happens. And I mean, you've got a real lab going on over here. It looks so legit.
Yeah, so this is the part when we walk into the lab, this is where we would process a lot of our tissues. And so we tend to think of it as everything you would know about human assisted reproductive technologies and human fertility clinics, we can do the same but for our animals. So coming through here, this is where we would start processing our tissues. We can do semen analyses. So if we have an animal under anesthesia, we can opportunistically do a sperm collection, and then we test it, check and see that there's sperm there, that it's motile, it looks normal. We can also post-castration or post-mortem, we can collect gametes as well, and again we would assess them. And then we come into here, and this is where we create our embryos. So this is actually a laminar flow hood. It's where a lot of the magic actually happens. So we would work with our cells here, our embryos here, and then the incubators just over back here would be for our cell culture, for embryo culture. Again, this is sort of our sterile lab. Where all the cells would be kept clean, because the media that we're using is also perfect for growing bacteria and fungus and that. So it's really important that we have a sterile space to be able to handle those things, because these cells will create offspring. They will be put into an animal to create offspring. So, and I actually have an example of some cells that I'm just going to pop into the incubator.
Also, I just like that we are celebrating love by coming to see how the babies are made sometimes at the Toronto Zoo. So a real life example of how your science brings life to the world.
So when an animal, when the whole natural breeding isn't working, when that kind of falls apart, we can rely on other technologies. That's really the key thing, and especially when you're talking about rare and endangered species, and you're talking about a zoo where we may only have the space to have one male, one female. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to produce offspring.
And really quick, what are we looking at here, Paula?
So these are somatic cells. So this is, we do freeze, as I said, sperm and eggs and embryos, but another thing we can do is actually take tissue and grow cells, and we can bank that, and that's another living, these are alive, these are living genetic material from an animal that we can also bank for a variety of different purposes.
Such a cool tour. Thanks so much for this peek behind the scenes. We're going to have more from the Toronto Zoo. Lots of love happening here, and more news with CP24 coming right up. So this is...
event companies are seeing a rise in interest in speed dating across Canada as single people look for an alternative.
Okay, so the alternative to dating apps, that is, numbers from Eventbrite, it showed dating and singles events. They grew by 76% from 2023 to 2024. Speed dating and matchmaking service Flair Event says it's seen an uptick in people attending their events since COVID-19 restrictions lifted. Organizers say a lot of people are trying speed dating as a new way to meet new people and form new relationships due to dating apps lacking real-world connection.
Well, Drake has released a new album on this Valentine's Day amid his beef with fellow rapper Kendrick Lamar.
The album, called Some Sexy Songs for You, is in collaboration with fellow Canadian rapper and music producer Party Next Door. The cover honors the city of Mississauga with the absolute condo buildings known for a curvy design. The 21-track album appears to address his feud with Lamar and the song Give Me a Hug, saying that he is moving on from rap beef.
You know, as someone from the city, I have to say I love the Mississauga representation. It's 5:58 minus 7. You're watching Toronto's Breaking News, CP24.
And there's more snow headed our way this weekend. Take a look at the city preparing. Thank you for watching. CTV News at 6 is next.